Coming up on Arirang News, the Federal Reserve signals that it expects to raise interest rates twice in 2023. And markets react as Fed Chair Jerome Powell says they're now talking about tapering. South Korea's finance minister says the effects of the government's efforts to boost the supply of homes will become apparent from next year. The opposition, though, wants to take a different approach to get people into homes by making it easier to borrow. And South Korea has now given first doses of coronavirus vaccines to more than 27% of its population, exceeding the target for this month and staying on course to herd immunity by autumn. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The Federal Reserve has decided to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at near zero, where it's been since early 2020. But officials are indicating that they expect 2 increases by the end of 2023. In response, the Korean financial authorities say they're going to closely monitor for any risks or volatility triggered by the monetary policies of major economies and will act in a timely manner. So In-kyung reports.
The Federal Reserve concluded a 2-day meeting on Wednesday by keeping its benchmark interest rate unchanged at a range of 0 to 0.25%, the same rate that it has been at since March last year. However, the Federal Open Market Committee said 11 of its 18 members forecast at least 2 rate hikes before the end of 2023, with 7 seeing a move as early as next year. 13 favored at least 1 rate hike by the end of 2023. When it comes to tapering, or slowing the purchases of $120 billion of assets a month, Chairman Jerome Powell said the U.S. economy was not yet at point where tapering purchases is appropriate. Powell said the Fed will give advance notice before announcing a decision regarding tapering, and that any decision will depend on the progress of the economic recovery. Responding to the Fed's meeting, South Korea's financial authorities said on Thursday that we closely watch any potential volatility in the financial market and act accordingly.
As there are risk factors to the real economy and financial markets, such as a rise in international commodity prices, while caution over inflation and premature tapering remains, we will closely monitor related economic data and look to countermeasures.
He added that the Korean economy has recovered enough to handle such a risk, citing strong exports and Korea's default risk being at its lowest since 2008. And the Bank of Korea said it found the FOMC meeting to be somewhat hawkish, hinting at monetary tightening. Vice President of the Bank of Korea, Lee Seung-won, stated that volatility in the domestic and international financial markets is likely to increase following economic policy changes from major economies, including the U.S. He added that Korea's central bank is planning to strengthen the monitoring of any factors which could lead to market instability and implement measures to stabilize the market if necessary. 서은경, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance minister said today that he thinks the effects of the government's new policy to boost the supply of homes will be felt more clearly from next year. Hong Nam-gi said at a meeting on real estate policy that there's been a rise in the construction of new housing since last month. This year in total, he said there will be around 460,000 new units, with 83,000 of them in Seoul. In fact, that's around the yearly average over the last 10 years. The government also aims to bring prices down, but they've been rising recently, and fewer properties have been changing hands. South Korea's main opposition parties proposed a relaxation of the real estate rules imposed by the Moon administration. In his policy speech to Parliament on Thursday, the leader of the People Power Party, Kim Ki-hyun, said the way to get more homes on the market, especially for young people and newlyweds, is to make it easier to get a loan and to lower property taxes. Kim said the limits on loan-to-value and debt-to-income ratios should be raised by 20 percentage points. Property taxes, capital gains taxes, and so on, he said, should only be for properties worth more than 1.8 billion won, which is around $1.6 million. The so-called coin cleanup is continuing on South Korea's cryptocurrency exchanges as regulators tighten the rules. To protect investors from fraudulent activities, including money laundering, the Financial Services Commission is prohibiting exchanges from handling digital assets issued by themselves or by persons related to them, including spouses and even distant relatives. The revision takes effect from June 26th. Violators could face fines of up to 100 million won, or about 88,000 US dollars, or face a business suspension. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Good to have you back on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, the big news overnight and our top story today was the Federal Open Markets Committee. Rates not changing yet, but the so-called dot plot now signaling 2 rate hikes in 2023. Jerome Powell also says that they're talking about tapering. Tell us what came out of the Fed on Wednesday.
A big attention is paid to today's FOMC meeting because U.S. Fed is supposed to give a signal on interest rate changes and tapering over very high inflation these days in the United States. Finally, they decided to maintain zero interest rate policy along with $120 billion monthly bond purchase in the market. But at the same time, Mr. Powell acknowledged that there were discussions on initiating tapering or less liquidity supply to the market. Also, according to the dot plot, which reveals FOMC members' own expectation on future interest rate changes, 13 members out of 18 expected there will be interest rate increase before the end of 2023. So that means U.S. Fed will be initiating both of tapering and interest rate increase earlier than expected.
Well, all this, of course, has introduced a dose of volatility to the markets. We can see that in today's exchange rate in Korea. Most Asian markets are down. But what effect do you see this having on the Korean financial markets and globally? And for that matter, how can Korea respond?
Higher inflation is not only U.S. economy's concern. It is also a growing burden to Korean economy. In May, annual inflation was 2.6% on yearly basis, which exceeds Bank of Korea's inflation target of 2%. But the fact that Korean economy is not yet moving to the full recovery makes Bank of Korea to hesitate on raising interest rate to stabilize the inflation. Also, in government and ruling party-wide economic policy priority, economic recovery is more important than stabilizing inflation. So Bank of Korea will adjust interest rate after confirming U.S. Fed's signal on raising interest rate.
And looking at the markets on Wall Street overnight, not a huge reaction to the talking about tapering, but there was a decline of about 0.5% on the S&P, a little more on the NASDAQ, on the Dow. What was the story on Wall Street?
U.S. market declined in the middle of Fed Chairman Powell's press conference after the FOMC meeting because market figured out changed mood on earlier interest rate increase. Dow Jones Industrial decreased by 0.8%, and Nasdaq also weakened by 0.2% yesterday. But European markets were mixed between negative 1% to positive 0.2% yesterday before the U.S. Fed's FOMC meeting.
And today in Korea, it was an interesting session in that the Kospi was down by almost 0.5%, but the KOSDAQ was up about the same amount. A lot of selling on the Kospi by foreigners and institutions. Tell us about the local market.
Domestic market were mixed, as you said, Devin, between Kospi and Kosdaq today. Kospi market was affected by U.S. market declines from Fed's higher possibility on tapering. Kospi had negative 0.4% return today, and almost all large capital stocks had negative returns. But Kosdaq have survived U.S. market's negative effects thanks to foreign investors' huge purchases. Kosdaq finally had a 0.5% return today.
And finally, Professor, Korea's had quite an impressive recovery in terms of exports since the start of the pandemic, but there are reports out there by economists saying that growth might not be so strong in the second half of this year. What's the concern there, and what might be done to keep the momentum going?
Over the coronavirus pandemic from last year, robust export has been the strongest factor that helps Korean economy to recover. And exports continued to grow this year with a 41% yearly increase in May. But according to recent report of government think tank, Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade, there is a high possibility that favorable environment on Korean export are weakened by the end of this year. They point out that from the second half of this year, the base effect of the last year's export decrease phase out, and demands for online business-related products declines. And finally, economic policy uncertainty increases due to higher inflation rate all over the world. So to avoid these difficulties, they recommend preemptive promotion policies in IT, biohealth, and battery industries to maintain current international export competitiveness.
Well, that will certainly be an important area of policy going forward, Professor. We'll have to leave it there for today, though. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The health authorities in South Korea have clarified that as the travel rules are eased, not every vaccinated person arriving in the country from overseas will be exempt from a 2-week quarantine. They reiterated today that quarantine-free entry starting next month applies only to people coming to visit family, to do business, scholarship, or research, or other visits deemed to be in the public interest. Tourists will still have to quarantine for 14 days. To be exempt, the traveler must have received a COVID-19 vaccine approved by the World Health Organization, such as Moderna, Pfizer, or AstraZeneca. South Korea has reported its first death from blood clots in a person who'd gotten the AstraZeneca vaccine. The health authorities said Wednesday that the person who died earlier the same day was a man in his 30s who'd been the second person confirmed to have the rare blood clot side effect. He was inoculated on May 27th and reported severe headaches and nausea 9 days later. The causal link between the vaccine and the blood clotting symptoms has not been established, but the health authorities say they're going to conduct an expert review of the case. South Korea has now given first doses of coronavirus vaccines to more than 27% of the population. That puts the country well ahead of its goal of getting first doses to a quarter of the population by the end of this month. The campaign will expand next month to people under 60, with the aim of inoculating 70% of the population by September. Today, South Korea reported 540 new cases of COVID-19. It's the second day new cases have been in the 500s. There was one more death, raising the death toll to 1,994. And behind the rapid progress in South Korea's vaccine campaign, of course, are the country's medical professionals and also many volunteers. Progress is likely to continue at a fast pace thanks to their efforts and as South Korea starts administering vaccines from Moderna. Our Kim Do-yeon went to a vaccination center to find out more.
6 days a week for the past 2 months, 79-year-old Lee Hyun-suk has been helping out at a COVID-19 vaccination center near her home with a group of volunteers nicknamed the Vaccination Militia. Volunteers like her are working tirelessly, one of the driving forces behind South Korea's inoculation drive, helping the country surpass 14 million first dose shots on Thursday, a million more than its initial goal for the first half of this year.
I'm a cancer survivor, so for 20 years, I was volunteering at a cancer center. But due to COVID-19, I can't do that anymore. So I first joined Mask Militia, which ended last year, and now I'm here with the Vaccination Militia. I'm doing this thinking I can go wherever I'm needed.
This is a vaccination center at Nonggu district in Seoul, a district with one of the highest vaccination rates in the city. Here, 720 Pfizer shots are given out each day, some as second doses for people over the age of 75, and the rest as first doses to eligible vaccine recipients under the age of 30. Health authorities had 200,000 Pfizer doses available for certain groups under 30 and opened reservations earlier this month. With such high demand, the reservations ended in just 2 days, 6 days earlier than what the authorities had planned. A young recipient told us one reason behind such a high sign-up rate for the vaccines.
After searching vaccination online, you can just input your social security number and find a nearest center, all in under 5 minutes. If things were complicated, I would have been too lazy to sign up and would have just waited for a text from the government.
Vaccinations for those under 30 who work in the medical field will pick up speed even further as Moderna is rolled out. It will be given out at 45 different hospitals nationwide, and so far 55,000 doses have been distributed. Moderna is the fourth type of vaccine that's being used in the country. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, the newly appointed U.S. envoy for North Korea, Sung Kim, will be visiting South Korea this week to discuss ways to re-engage in talks with the regime. Seoul's Unification Ministry said today that Kim's first visit as the new envoy is scheduled from this Saturday to next Wednesday. Kim will be visiting the Unification Ministry and while there also meeting with the Unification Minister Lee In-young. Also visiting Seoul will be the Japanese Foreign Ministry's Director General for Asian and Oceanian Affairs, Takehiro Funakoshi, for possible three-way talks with his counterparts. And on to President Moon Jae-in's state visit to Spain. On Wednesday, his second day there, the South Korean leader met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, and the leaders agreed to upgrade their countries' bilateral relations, especially in terms of economic cooperation and climate change. Hong Yu reports.
South Korea and Spain have upgraded their relations to a strategic partnership and have plans to enhance bilateral relations in diverse sectors. President Moon Jae-in and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez signed a joint statement between the two countries on Wednesday, as well as MOUs for green energy, digital industry 4.0, and startups. The MOUs involve cooperating on the research and development of green energy and sharing policies and technologies to foster innovative startups and boost the transition into a digital economy. Moon and Sanchez also signed a customs mutual assistance agreement to promote economic exchanges and strengthen practical cooperation. They also agreed to work together in responding to global issues related to health and climate change. During the bilateral summit, Prime Minister Sanchez also reaffirmed his support to President Moon for the Korean Peninsula peace process. Prior to the summit, the two leaders took part in the South Korea-Spain Green and Digital Business Forum. Business leaders from both countries were present to discuss practical ways to help economic recovery and secure green digital growth. Spanish renewable energy company Ocean Winds announced that it would invest $100 million to establish an offshore wind farm in Incheon, South Korea. Another Spanish renewable energy company, EDPR, is to invest the same amount for an offshore wind farm in Goheung, Jeollanam-do province. President Moon at the forum suggested cooperation in the low-carbon economy and digital innovation.
최고의 전기차와 수소차, 배터리 기술력을 가진 한국이 차세대 모빌리티 분야에서도 스페인과 새로운 성공 모델을 만들게 되길 기대합니다. 한국은 양국 기업 간의 협력을 적극 지원할 것입니다.
Moon added that through their startup cooperation MOU, the two countries can quickly transition into the digital economy. He hopes the two countries enter the 5G electric vehicles and renewable energy markets and contribute to improve global economic reconstruction as well as bilateral economic development. 홍유, Arirang News.
On the same day, President Moon delivered a speech to the Spanish Senate, saying the two countries have so much in common. He expressed hope that Seoul and Madrid will lead the future of shared prosperity within a blooming global economy. Kim Da-mi reports.
South Korea and Spain will open a future of shared prosperity by responding to new challenges together through inclusion, coexistence, solidarity, and cooperation. This from President Moon Jae-in on Wednesday as he became the first South Korean leader to deliver a speech at the Spanish Senate in Madrid.
스페인은 포용과 상생, 이해와 협의를 통해 국제적 분열을 해소하는 연결 국가를 추구합니다. 한국은 대륙과 해양을 잇고 선진국과 개도국을 연결하며 아시아의 평화와 번영의 질서를 선도하는 교량 국가를 꿈꿉니다.
Moon further highlighted how the people of South Korea and Spain have transformed their countries into full democracies following respective civil wars and authoritarian regimes. He added Korea is proud and can appreciate what Spain has gone through in overcoming the pandemic with a spirit of inclusiveness and solidarity. Later in the day, the South Korean leader met with economic leaders in Barcelona, where he said countries with strong cooperation will lead the world as well as the global economy with a leading role in digital and green economy.
스페인과 한국이 먼저 시작합시다. 우리가 힘을 모은다면 그 주인공이 될 수 있으리라 확신합니다.
Reflecting on Spain's lifting of lockdowns last month, Moon noted the world witnessed hope and said the world will overcome the pandemic. Prior to Moon's speech, the president of the Spanish Senate also pledged to continue working with Seoul, pointing out Spanish young people's love of and interest in K-pop and Korean food and movies. Further marking the South Korean leader's visit to Spain this week, an agreement has been made to extend a year of mutual visit, with hopes of deepening the friendship and trust between the two countries. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
And Wednesday saw the highly anticipated summit in Geneva between U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Both sides were fairly positive about the talks afterwards, but they're not believed to have made any major breakthroughs. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The first face-to-face summit between U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin garnered global attention from start to finish. The leaders arrived, Putin first, then Biden, at the summit venue on the shores of Lake Geneva on Wednesday afternoon local time. According to Reuters, the talks lasted about 3 hours, less than what Biden's advisors had expected. But President Biden said they had a very intense and detailed meeting, adding that they didn't need to spend more time talking. While President Putin also described the summit as generally positive, pundits believe no major breakthroughs were made.
I think that we speak the same language on the whole, but it doesn't mean that we should look into each other's souls, eyes, and swear eternal love and friendship. Not at all. We protect interests of our countries and our people, and these relations are pragmatic first of all.
In a joint statement after the talks, the two sides said the summit showed Washington and Moscow are able to make progress on shared goals even during periods of tension. It added the two leaders agreed on areas of mutual cooperation, including strategic stability and arms control measures. This includes the resumption of stalled nuclear talks to lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures. They also agreed to return their respective ambassadors to their posts. For months, no senior diplomat has been posted in either country. During a separate post-summit press conference, President Biden stressed that human rights issues were a major agenda item.
I made it clear to President Putin that we'll continue to raise issues of fundamental human rights, because that's what we are. I made it clear that we will not tolerate attempts to violate our democratic sovereignty or destabilize our democratic elections, and we would respond. The bottom line is, I told President Putin that we need to have some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by.
Biden added that they also spent a lot of time discussing cybersecurity. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
That's who we are. The idea is...
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.